Hello and welcome to the Mysticast, where you join Jack Stafford, a member of the Aetherius Society, the cosmic religion for the Aquarian Age, as we break down the barriers between religion, science, metaphysics, philosophy, and mysticism, all of which are really the only aspects of the self-same quest for truth. Please note this is an independent program, not produced or fact-checked by the Aetherius Society. Today we have a very special episode. We have Paul Nugent of the Aetherius Society speaking to Anne Baring. Well, it's lovely to be able to connect you to I want you to thank you first for introducing us to Anne. She's been on this. This is her third time on the show.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, let me say, I mean, I must confess, Anne, I'm a terribly, terribly slow reader, and your book, your magnum opus, The Dream of the Cosmos, A Quest for the Soul. When I saw that it's 600 pages, I'm afraid it rather daunted me. In fact, it's taken me 1 year to read the present book that I'm still reading. But I thought, well, I have to know a bit more about Anne. So I went online yesterday and I found this wonderful interview you did, I think, about a year ago with Irvin Laszlo.
Yes.
And Alison Goldman, Dawn of an Era of Well-Being. And so I was able to, I mean, I didn't find anything that I didn't, expect to hear at all. But, one of the things you did say, well, you spoke about the advantage of being 90 because you figured out what this whole thing is about, and, what life is about. And you also said, if anything, you've just become more emphatic about sharing your wisdom with the world. I guess just because of the urgency, the way the cul-de-sac into which we haven't even found ourselves. We're in a cul-de-sac. Unfortunately, we don't know we're in a cul-de-sac.
That's right. Yeah.
There is. I utterly share with you this this need for humanity to awaken just to a much greater vision and understanding of who and what we are.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. In fact, if you don't want to read the book, what you need to do is to go onto my website, and there you'll find in 12 different compartments a sort of just a brief summary of what's in each chapter. So you don't have to read the full book. That will help you a lot. And you have pictures and very succinct description of what's
Right.
what's in the book, and you don't need to read the book, but that would help you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very, very much. So what have you been up to?
Well, I'm writing the book on the Holy Spirit now, which is taking time because there are a lot of family problems. Well, my husband is very old. He's 93, but he's much, much more feeble and frail than I am. And he needs a lot of attention. We have got a carer, but even so, there's lots to do. There's food to get. There's meals to think of, daughters to deal with, all sorts of daily things. And so the book hasn't been put on the side. But what I'm doing is I'm putting in, which I've only just come to the last 2 or 3 days, a chapter on the roots of evil. Because I think that evil is really coming on strong now. And there is an archbishop, which I only heard of today, an archbishop called, I can't remember. I've sent it to Brenda just now.
Is he American? Is he an American archbishop?
No, he's an Italian one, I think.
Okay.
Vignano, that's his name. Carlo Vignano, Vignono. And
Right.
he has just, in one talk, he gave the whole revelation of the plot to destroy humanity on the part of the WEF and the World Economic Forum and those who have been working for it, and all the politicians who've been trained by that forum over some 20 years or even 30 years for this moment. And the real evil that they were engaged in, which was, first of all, to create the virus. That was done through, I have to sort of explain that another time, but they create the virus. Second, which was a bioweapon. It wasn't a natural virus. It was deliberately created by two laboratories, one in America and one in Wuhan, working together, paid for by the American government. So that's one thing. The second thing, that the vaccines were deliberately created and called vaccines, which they're not. They're bioweapons also, which damage the human immune system and are causing and have caused many people to die, but also to develop cancers from the vaccinations, because they're bioweapons, as it were. They have things in them which trigger cancers and which cause death. So that's a happy thought. And already thousands of people, I think something like 17 million, have died from these vaccinations overall. None of this is, I'm suspecting, is all new to you, and it's certainly new to most.
No, it's not new to me at all. It's almost, dare I say, old hat. You know, as soon as you mentioned you know, your elderly husband, my father, who was of a similar age, he died a year ago. Like your own husband, he was an artist. But unfortunately, 2 years ago, my 65-year-old brother at the time most mysteriously developed a throat cancer. I don't think he's ever smoked a cigarette in his life. And very tragically, one Sunday morning, almost exactly 2 years ago, he didn't wake up. And my own, because I'm totally on board with you with regards to the horrible, horrible WEF and, you know, the man behind it all. I don't rule out that my brother actually died of the vaccine. But I just don't want to sort of get too personally caught up in going down rabbit holes. But I'm very aware of you know, the increase in the number of deaths as a consequence since COVID, not related, you know, not COVID related.
COVID, but relate, yes, it's called the excess deaths. There's just been a debate in Parliament here about it. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll send this talk from the Archbishop to Jack. If Jack will send me his email, then I can
Yes,
send...
I've got it here in front of me. Deborah and I have the same email address, so
you do?
I can forward it,
And then you can forward it to Paul for me.
He's
because
a
the
big
fact
name,
that
this
an
Archbishop
Archbishop has come out is quite very significant. And also,
well, I don't think he's alone. I mentioned an American. You know, is he American? Because I know that there are American cardinals or monsignors or whatever who have been speaking about the similar path that humanity is on and how it is being orchestrated in plain sight, actually. But you know, on a far more positive note, I think more and more people are sort of awakening to what is really going on.
Yes, they are.
And so, you know, I don't abandon all hope, but by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, evil is on the rise. Yes, I mean, I think in that sense, frankly, I think we are living and have been for a long time, but living in end times. But I think that these end times, as with everything in creation, is being accelerated. I mean, time just seems, I don't know if you notice this, but it flies by.
A week after week just goes by like a day, you know.
They do. Yes, they do.
It is. And this is a time of judgment. As Jack will show you my mother's messages, which I published in July. In there, they say that this is the time of judgment and humanity has to step up to the plate or perish, really. That's the choice. We have to wake up.
Yeah. Well, sorry.
Saying that a long time ago in 1943, they said the killing has to stop. All the scientific experiments messing around with nature has to stop. And all that kind of thing they were saying between 1943 and 1963 in messages to my mother that were received through a friend of hers over a 20-year period. And I inherited these books of the messages. And last February, I was just telling Jack, I thought, well, I must get them out somehow, because my mother couldn't in her time. There was no way that she could put them out. But I can, because of the internet and because of the ability to transcribe them and everything. So they're all out now in this book, which Jack has got. And you can get it in America on Amazon if you want to read. It's called Messages from a Transcendent Dimension,
Yes, this is the book.
and that's the book.
Oh, right. Yeah, I have seen that on your website. And that was all channeled through your mother?
Yes, and a friend, a French friend.
Right. Well, I mean, when you say that was sort of between 1943 and 1963, it was in that same era that Findhorn began. You must be obviously
I
very
know about
familiar.
Fintown. Yes, I do. Yes, I haven't
Have
been
you
there
not?
myself. No, I haven't.
I went a couple of times in the 80s, but of course that was started by Eileen Caddy and Dorothy McLean, again receiving messages. They were in communication with the divas, and they grew through communication with the divas of the plants and the vegetables. They grew a phenomenal vegetable because the
Yes.
divas of the peas were saying, you know, we like to be by the carrots, you know,
Yeah.
things like that. We can't stand the gooseberries,
Yeah.
and so they followed that advice and built this extraordinary garden. And so yes, I mean, I've also heard, wasn't your mother also receiving messages from Jesus?
Yes, from Jesus and St. Francis. Those were the two.
And they've been transcribed in your book.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes, they've been
Wonderful.
word for word. They're absolutely accurate. And there was also another sort of guide, sort of halfway between heaven and earth, called Azraf, a Persian guy,
Mm.
who my mother loved very much and talked to a lot. So I was
Well,
brought up with this. You see, this was all very natural to me because from the age of 13, I knew about these messages, although I didn't wasn't read all of them, but I had some myself, and they told me to prepare for a mission that had to do something with other women.
mm.
They didn't use the word the feminine in that time, but just that your work will be with women, they said.
Well, that's one. I mean, you will have, from reading my own book. I don't suppose you've yet come across the 12 blessings.
No, I haven't. No.
Well, I'll send you a copy, because that is what brought myself into the Aetherius Society, over nearly 40 years ago now, when I was a young man living in London, and I knew that there had to be more to life, and I didn't know where to look, so I started reading the Bible, well, the New Testament. It had a very profound effect on me, and later, through my work, I was introduced to the Aetherius Society, where they claimed that on 12 consecutive Sundays in 1958, which was the year I was born, Jesus had communicated through the founder of the Aetherius Society, George King, who you read about, giving essentially a cosmic extension to the Sermon on the Mount, just with this sort of incredible exponential series of teachings. It just gets more and more and more phenomenal, this evolutionary journey that we're on, into just greater realizations and understandings of I suppose what God is, because it essentially is, as you know, I mean, everything is God. There's nothing that is not God. We're just aspects of it, learning more and more about it in this exponential journey of consciousness that we're all taking. And as I listened, because they were all recorded as they were delivered through George King, who was in what we call a positive yogic samadhic trance. And as I listened to these, I could tell that there was nothing that was. It had the complete hallmark of truth about it, and not only the hallmark of truth, but as importantly, profound spiritual wisdom that literally I couldn't ignore. And that's why I began to sort of take the Aetherius Society, very seriously. But I mean, I would love for you to. Well, I will make sure if you can also communicate through Jack or email myself an address, and I will make sure that you receive a copy of the 12 blessings, because it is a remarkable series of teachings.
Well, that's very kind of you, because I think what Jesus was saying was that the church had misinterpreted his teaching and taken the wrong path, which was the path of power, which indeed it did after the 4th century, and that it really had to get back on track, or humanity had to get back on track. And also, my whole work is to enlarge the image of God. This idea of the transcendent Father in heaven has put people completely in the wrong box, so to speak, because, as you said, God is everything. And what happened with the patriarchal religions, the 3 patriarchal religions, in discarding the feminine principle, which happened in the Hebrew tradition in 623 BC, they discarded the connection with the earth and with nature. They cut off God from nature. And then they went on the path from 2,500 years ago, on the path looking always up to the Father in heaven, but never to the Mother Earth, or to the Mother in heaven, for that matter. The goddess was just simply wiped out. I've got a very powerful image of a knife cutting through an umbilical cord in the talks that I give, because that was what happened. They cut the umbilical cord with nature. And in doing so, they cut man, or humanity, off from the feminine aspect of the divine. And they also cut them off from the earth, and from valuing the earth and loving the earth and caring for the earth, with all the attention going to trying to ascend to the Father spiritually by denying the body, denying sexuality, and demonizing sexuality, and all the mistakes that went with that false concept of God. So my work has been to correct that concept, bring in the feminine principle, show that you have to have both feminine and masculine in the image of God, because we have man and woman in the image of God. And so this new book on the Holy Spirit is just adding a bit, but also adding things like the roots of evil, and Mary Magdalene, the fact that she was married to Jesus. There's no question about that now. And I've done a lot of work on that, because you may not know it, but there was a book of her gospel published in 2010 by people in France who have the copy still. The copy that she wrote herself in Alexandria is called The Gospel of the Beloved Companion. You might be interested in reading that.
Right. Well, I'd have to agree with you. I mean, I think also the whole concept of reincarnation was removed from...
Yeah, it was in the 5th century by Justinian. Yeah, it was removed very stupidly. So there's Mary Magdalene. There's also the fact that the Gospel of John, which everyone thought was written about the beloved disciple, is actually about the beloved wife or companion. And so John, the writer of John, who was somebody called John the Elder, who lived in Ephesus, and who wrote it in about 90 AD, long after the crucifixion, he copied Mary Magdalene's gospel, practically word for word, but he changed things that he wanted to change to fit in with the Christian church, which was already established at that time. And so there's a wonderful book, which you will never read because it's 600 pages or 700 pages, written by a woman who lives in the Netherlands. And she has dissected the Gospel of John and compared it word for word with the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, or the Beloved Companion, and shown how John redacted wherever Jesus referred in the Gospel of the Beloved Companion to the Holy Spirit as his mother, John changed it to the God the Father. So we lost the actual words of Jesus to Mary Magdalene, and the whole. You must get that gospel, because that's an essential.
Well, there's various things that you sort of, make me consider there. I mean, because what you're talking about is changes to Christianity, but in terms of the other faiths, I mean, 100, 200 years ago, before mankind had mass travel and all the rest of it, you still had, millions, if not, hundreds of millions, maybe a billion, Hindus and Buddhists, etc. Do you think that they have similarly been corrupted, their teachings?
I don't think so much with Buddhism, but certainly with Hinduism, because they've lost the Upanishad vision, definitely.
Yes, that would be true.
They've lost the mystical vision, except for a few teachers in India who are still there, who are still teaching the true vision. But the people have completely lost the plot because they've become Hinduized, if you like, and they've got a bad leader in Modi who is trying to emphasize their Hinduism and diminishing the Muslims who live in India, which is a great danger because there could be another massacre of Muslims there. He's an incredibly stupid, stubborn, stiff-necked man who is all out for power again, and he sees his power by increasing the power of Hinduism. So that they have lost the plot, just as Christianity has as well. All to do again with power. That is the big thing that Jesus warned about. He called it Caesar, and they've all fallen under the power of Caesar. And but I think Buddhism less so, because the Buddha's teaching was really about compassion. It wasn't a belief system. It was about a mode of behavior. And I think that Jesus traveled to India during his early years, probably in his 20s, and also to Egypt. And he certainly brought back teachings from the Buddhist university, which he might have been sent to in, I can't remember the name of it, begins with a T, which is now in Pakistan. And he would have absorbed the Buddha's teaching, which was very simple. And he would have studied with the Buddhist monks there. Taxila, that was what it was called, the University of Taxila, which was very famous at that time in the 1st century. So, and also he didn't die on the crucifix. He returned to India after the crucifixion. He went to a place called Galatia, and then he went to Persia, and then he went on to India. And I think he died in India, because I've been to his tomb, which is supposed to be his tomb in Kashmir. So the whole story is not true that we've been presented with. He certainly had an ascension experience, but his body was taken down from the crucifix and tended in Joseph of Arimathea's own, sepulchre. And he was healed by therapeutes, Essene therapeutes, who came to him during the night after the crucifixion and worked on him until the day when people were allowed to visit the tomb, which I think was on the Sunday, when Mary Magdalene was the first visitor. So there's a whole hinterland of story there, which we could spend a lot of time on. I accept it because I know the story from the Indian side. There's too much evidence that he went to, not only to India, but that he went to Ladakh and a monastery there called Themis, and there's evidence there that he was there. So all that is not known to Christians, although it's coming out. It's all on the internet now. So one can find it if one wants to look for it.
Well, this leads me to my other sort of question, I suppose, because one of the things you pointed out in your conversation with Erwin Laszlo last year is that we're here for the evolution of the planet itself. You were saying something along those lines. And you said, but we're not taught these things in school. And we're not taught these things in school. As I put in my book, it's probably why I failed just about everything at school, because I wasn't taught what I wanted to be taught, what I intuitively knew. And that was the thing. We can still have an intuitive, well, we do have an intuitive awareness. We don't access it of the importance of the divine feminine, the planet herself, nature, all of these forces. And you can throw into that, why are we so sort of blind, so to speak, by what we're told through the mass media, etc., etc.? Why isn't the intuition, the instinct that we all have, kicking in to a greater extent?
Well, I tell you why. Because scientific materialism killed off the spiritual impulse, as it were. It's killed off the intuition because it only accepted what was provable in scientific terms, and it wrote off God as unprovable, the soul as unprovable. And so
but you don't believe that.
No, of course I don't.
And I don't believe that. So, but I mean, because for me, that is part of my soul, if you like. I mean, I don't think you can write off the soul. You can't. Sort of doctrine can't deny the existence of the soul. I think we all have. Well, it only did on paper, but I don't see how one can eradicate the soul, so to speak.
Well, you couldn't eradicate it from the great poets of the 18th century. You couldn't do it with that. But they've had 300 years of teaching in the schools, which has denied the existence of God and the whole Christianity and religion.
Then what made you not accept that?
Because I had a mother who brought me up with these messages, so I knew that there was something else. But I hated church. I hated the Protestant church. I hated the guilt and the sin and the breast beating and how sinful we are. And I hated the crucifix everywhere, dripping blood. I loathed all that. So my instinct was to look for something else. And it's led me, first of all, to an education, a good education. And secondly, I traveled all over the Far East when I was in my 25th year. And so I connected with Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism at the age of 25. And I began to read the books. And I wrote a book called The One Work, which was the first book I wrote when I was 28. And in that, I ended up, the last words were, heaven and earth are one and everything is God. So I knew that at the age of 28.
Intuitively?
No, I just knew it. Well, I suppose intuitively, yes. But also because I learned from the Eastern religions that everything was sacred. Everything was holy. And that wasn't in Christianity.
You mentioned the cross and dripping blood, etc. I mean, I'm going to read. I'd like to read just a few lines from the last blessing, which is a blessing to the absolute.
Okay.
And Jesus says, "O little children, do not let the fools of your world limit your concept. Do not let them limit your thought. Do not let them limit your visualization. Do not let them limit your soul, but think upon these things. Let these truths enter into your consciousness so that you may be better prepared for your journey through experience." And then he goes on, look at this. George King is holding a wooden cross at the time that had been blessed by Jesus. Jesus says, look at this. Look what the Christian church has done to it. It is these people who have stained it with the continual flow of my blood. This, my children, is not the symbol of death. It is the symbol of resurrection.
Yeah, exactly.
It is not the symbol of the terrible death depicted by your foolish priests. It is the lasting symbol of resurrection of the spirit of man up to the mighty Godhead through karmic experience. That is what it is.
Yeah, well, exactly. I couldn't marvelously put there. But the thing is, he said in my messages, if you get that book, Jesus said that the contemplation of blood as being he quoted a passage, I quoted a passage from John about in the sacrament, taking the body and blood of Christ and eating the wafer and drinking the wine. With the symbolism, that was disastrous because it created a blood sacrifice worship, which led to Nazism. That's what Jesus said in the book. And it was a complete misconstruction of what should have been emphasized, which was the resurrection. And one should have had that wonderful cross from San Damiano in Assisi, which inspired St. Francis to go on his mission, which was of the resurrected Christ speaking to him. So, there've been huge mistakes. And also Christianity liked that whole idea because it made guilt in the populace much, much deeper and stronger. They could make the populace say, it's your fault that he's crucified and that he's had this terrible death. It's because of your sin that this happened. And that's what they've preached for thousands of years, 2,000 years.
Then, Anne, then what do you make of Ascension? What does it mean? What does Ascension mean? Because Jesus came.
You enter into the true essence of what you are, the higher dimensions of what you are. Because we here on this planet, we're very limited by the physical dimension that we're in, the material dimension, and we lose touch with the higher dimensions that we also are, but we don't know about because nobody tells them, which are the etheric body and the astral body and the higher mental body. There's about seven different degrees of elements of ourselves we know nothing about. And so when we ascend through those or with those or into those, I don't know which. I'll come back and tell you when I go. But we enter into the divine ground, and the divine ground is light, pure light. And so we ascend into light and love. Those are the two elements.
Well, how do you respond to, you see, you mentioned, Jesus, we would totally agree with you in those lost years, or Jesus as a teenager in his 20s, whatever, visiting the East, Egypt. I would think also coming to our beloved England.
He did
Um,
come. Yes, he did with his
yes,
uncle, because his uncle was a shipping magnate.
right, right. But you see, we in the Aetherius Society, we understand that Jesus and Buddha, in fact, all of the great masters came from other worlds, higher
No,
dimensions of
absolutely.
other worlds within our own solar system.
Yeah,
Uh,
I would agree.
right. So you would agree with that?
Well, maybe Arcturus and the Pleiades, those sort of places they would have come from.
Right. Well, so our understanding is that Jesus and Buddha both came from Venus. Where Jesus is quoted the way he says in the Bible, "I am from the bright morning star." Not that it really matters. It's not.
That could have been Sirius, the great star, because that was the great star of Egypt at dawn. Anyway, there was Sirius, the Pleiades, and Arcturus, and I think Cygnus. Anyway, many places they could have come from, and they certainly came from those higher dimensions, and they brought the teaching with them about love, both of them, and compassion. Those were the two things that they emphasized. And if you read the Gospel of the Beloved Companion, there is in that the ascension of Mary Magdalene as she goes up through the tree of life, through 7 branches until she reaches the 8th level. And at the 8th level, she is reunited with the divine ground and with the Divine Mother, really. It's very moving to read. It will bring tears to your eyes when you read it.
How much do you liken our world, what it's going through, what it has been going through, what it's almost coming to a climax, with how much you relate that to the Lord of the Rings trilogy?
Well,
if at all.
I think, yes, you could see the Lord of the Rings as this great battle which is going on. It's not the battle that the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims think about as a physical battle. It's a battle on the inner planes for control of the planet, really, and for
good versus evil.
Yeah, it really
Good
is.
versus,
And I think we can see it now. I mean, until a few years ago, until the COVID thing, we had no idea of the plan to eliminate the majority of humanity, and so that it could be ruled by a cabal of people who would be immensely powerful and immensely rich and immensely evil. We had no idea, but we have now. And the fact that this is coming out, I think, is good, because all the shadow, in the Jungian sense, all the shadow is coming up into consciousness, and we are being shown what we have been, as it were, the victim of for centuries or millennia,
right.
without knowing it, because we've always obeyed the authority of the church and the authority of government without questioning, is this right or wrong?
And in the sense that, or in the realization that there are greater beings inhabiting higher dimensions of this world and other worlds, the very mere fact that we have evil would imply, at least in our understanding, that there are at the same time lower astral realms,
Yeah,
and that the people we've got on Earth today who are running the show are simply puppets of
that's
something
right.
far more sinister.
I would agree. In the messages that Jesus called them Ahriman, the forces of Ahriman. But he said there has been a great battle fought in another dimension against these evil forces, and that has been won by, he said, by the Archangel Michael and all of those with him, sort of thing. But,
well, it's Operation Carmelite. I mean, it's the reason George King and 2 other adepts inhabited physical bodies. How George King was born in 1919, was to go into the lower astral realms, to fight. We have one book, The 3 Saviors Are Here, and the subtitle is The Transmutation of Satan. It's a battle that was communicated through George King from October 26, 1967 through February the 24th, 1969, 24 phases. These are actually going to be played, at least to members of the Aetherius Society, these recordings. I've heard them before. I mean, it's an outstanding, astounding, as well as outstanding conflict that took place in the lower astral realms of Earth during that period, that critical period of the 60s, cleaning out the very worst of those lower astral realms, but it is still filtering through onto this physical plane. I mean, to a certain extent, humanity has also got to do its fair share of the fight. It's for us, and so much, or everything that you're saying, or at least a great deal of it, together with others, I just feel like it's there are all these streams and rivers that are sort of taking, greater momentum, all coming together towards some kind of confluence. These are the forces of light. I mean, I mentioned the Lord of the Rings. I say that slightly tongue in cheek because I consider myself. You do remember the Ents? The Ents are the trees, right at the end of the Ents. The Ents get a bit mad. Well, I think I'm an Ent because I'm a new gent. But I just think that these forces of light on here on Middle Earth, we are gathering. There is a momentum that's building, and I think that this is really what is most critical, is as an aspect of this awakening that's taking place, is for us literally to take up spiritual arms, against this conflict. It's part of the 12 blessings. It's not just a wonderful teaching, it's an incredibly powerful spiritual practice. Jesus gave prayer at the end of at least 9 of the blessings, and it invokes this phenomenal energy, this we call it spiritual and love energy, if you like, to be directed out literally for the upliftment of humanity. I mean, another thing that we also store through in another mission we perform called Operation Prayer Pack, that we held it last night. We do every Thursday evening. Invoking spiritual energy through mantra combined with prayer at the same time. It's very dynamic. And storing that energy in what we call a battery, because it's basically storing energy. But it's filled with crystal. I can't go too much into detail. But then that is released at times of crisis upon our world, literally for healing, for transmutation, for upliftment of the whole human race. It's in terms of that urgency, we ourselves need to become far more active, both in talking about these, standing up. I mean, bravery is the first freedom when it comes to the 9 freedoms, which is this evolutionary journey that we're all on. It's awakening this bravery. It's why I would question you. I think we need to awaken our own souls. We need to awaken our own souls.
This is happening very much so all over the world now in different groups, not necessarily the group your own group speaking of, but
I agree.
There are thousands of groups now working for the planet, for each other, to help the sick and to help the situation in Gaza and Israel.
Absolutely.
Praying. And the whole Maharishi movement, they're all praying. So there's a great deal of prayer going on, and I think this is wonderful and very necessary because we are confronting the forces of evil. There's another thing, that we're at the beginning now of a new 21,000-year cycle in the precession of equinoxes. And this is very important, and we're in between the Piscean and the Aquarian age. We're in that sort of crossover period of about 200 years, apparently, when things get much more intense. And this is what's happening now. An intensification of everything is taking place. Even the effect of the moon is stronger. The effect of the stars is stronger. And the effect of the cosmic rays is stronger. So one has to bear in mind the astrological background as well. And I think you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more.
Well, and one thing I've often likened life to a bit is a computer game called Space Invaders. I have to say I've only played it maybe once a very long time ago, and I was absolutely useless at it. But have you ever seen anybody playing Space Invaders?
No, no, because I'm not
Fine.
into that. I'm not into the game thing.
Well, good for you, and nor am I. But so from watching other people who are very good at it, um, you go beyond the early stages of zapping the people that are coming, the enemy forces coming at you. But it gets more and more convoluted and fast and difficult and thick. So you have to become more and more skilled at combating all these things that are coming at you out of the screen. And I just feel that, as I say, life is a bit like that in a certain way. I mean, it's just becoming far more intense. It's far more intense. But I have to say that, I mean, the forces of light to me are undefeatable, because God cannot be
They are,
defeated.
because God is light. And
God is light.
There's no question about that. But on this planet, we've got ourselves into a right old mess because of our religions and because of the materialism, which now is affecting everybody, and because of the social media, which is used as an instrument of manipulation and sort of the wrong sort of guidance, really, and particularly affecting the young, sucking it in. There's pornography, which is a disastrous thing for the young men to watch, which they do all the time. There are all sorts of things that parents can't control anymore because the internet is beyond their power of controlling their children. So there's all that. Then there's the stupidity of governments, and I suspect the complicity of governments in all this COVID business, because they saw a wonderful opportunity of power, being able to close the whole thing down, ruin small businesses, increase their own whatever it might be. So there are many factors now which we weren't really aware of before. 50 years ago, we were just going along happily with our lives, getting married, getting children,
Right.
etc. We weren't confronted with the internet situation, this huge communication expansion, as it were. That's completely new in the last, 20, 30 years. So, and now we're into the AI situation, and you can be sure that the people who have been pushing all the other stuff will be pushing AI to take us over. That's
Right,
the plan. And
Yeah.
it will take a great deal of intelligence to resist that. I don't know. I shall be gone by then and looking down from above.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you're still full of vigor, very evidently. And what the scenario you're talking about, I mean, the date that's given, at least by the WEF, is 2030. So it may, you may not be long gone, and it obviously may not be 2030.
Well,
but
maybe a bit feeble by then. But anyway, that is the agenda 2030. And that dreadful Yuval Harari, who I've been writing about for my book today, who calls us useless eaters, and that the God and the soul are now replaced by, what's he called it? Oh dear, he's got a word for it, a phrase for it. Not useless eaters. Hackable animals, that's what we are. Hackable.
right. Yeah.
And he's a psychopath, and yet he stands up on the stage and people listen to him instead of shutting him up. They just sit and listen and hypnotize, really.
Well, if we, I don't know how we're doing for time, and if my phone's going to run out, but one final, hopefully not final, but one other question certainly is, I mean, the role of the Mother Earth in all of this, because in that evolutionary sense, she herself is evolving, is changing.
Yeah, what part of them?
Her frequencies are quickening, and all towards almost, you could say, a heaven on earth that is coming.
It could be,
And
if we go through this process of ascension that we're supposed to be going through. I
well,
want to tell you two things in case your thing runs out. The first is that the American government has recognized UFOs as being all around us and actually landing in America over the last 70 years. They've suppressed all the evidence, but the president has just passed a law which forces them to reveal it in the next 300 days. That's one thing. And the second thing, what was the second thing? That UFOs are present? So that changes everything, because it's the first time
It's the biggest game changer of the lot, extraterrestrial.
Exactly.
It's
It
the biggest,
changes everything. So I want
because
to
it's the only
that.
thing that will sufficiently garner all of our attentions.
Oh, and
But I think
the other thing was that Mother Earth spoke through someone called, not through him, but Jim Garrison, who ran of Ubiquity University and who is now in charge of dealing with this whole UFO business in Washington, D.C. He's got a new post there. He, on his website, at the announcement of this new thing about the UFOs, he also put a message from the Kogi Indians, who are the only people on the planet who have stayed free from anything to do with the contamination of our culture for thousands of years. And they sent a message from Mother Earth saying, I give you, I think, 6 months. If you don't turn the thing around, I will then cause the whole planet to be reduced to 1/3 of the population, I think, or something like that, or 1/3 of something. I could send it to you if I'll send it to Jack.
Well, the cosmic masters who've communicated through George King would agree with that. I mean, we don't put a timeline on it. They also mentioned that another master will come to Earth, and they said this will be shortly. They said this back in 1958, but shortly can have a very different connotation to them than it does to us. But we would certainly, in terms of the Earth will rise in the evolutionary sense. And those who are unable to withstand the higher frequency of vibration will not be taken out of creation, because, as we know, everything's a part of God. You can't just take it out of creation, but will be reborn upon another, more involved planet. Yeah, to continue their evolutionary cycle.
Well, that would be a great blessing for the poor Earth, really, and for all of us who've had to struggle through traumatic suffering for thousands of years through these people who are always making war. We've had 4,000 years of war, and God knows how many millions or billions of young men killed. And, suffering from that. And also things like what's going on in Gaza, which is a repetition of what the Germans did to the Jews. And it's just dreadful. So one wishes that for the end of this trauma, and it's not sin, it's trauma that the church should have been addressing. It's nothing. The sin comes from trauma, and people sin because they're traumatized, and they repeat the pattern of traumatization in generation after generation. I mean, you can see it happening now in Israel and Gaza. So it's unconscious. But what's happening now, the shadow is coming in the Jungian sense. It's coming to the surface. It's rising up so we can see it clearly, much more clearly than we did.
Indeed. And
that is a great
work to transmute it. But it's I don't think there's enough people who are working for that, spiritual purpose at this time. There's too many bystanders, but sitting on the fence or.
Well, there are many bystanders, but I think you only need a core. You only need 1%, apparently, or 1% or 10% of humanity, which
That's
is
right.
I don't know how many million it is, but it's not a huge amount. And I certainly think even people in Australia are waking up, in New Zealand, and people.
And what do you mean? The Australians and the New Zealanders are waking up.
Yeah, people are. And also,
sure, they're delighted to know it.
There was a man called Dr. David Martin who gave a marvelous address to the European Union about all this COVID thing, and his video went out to 4 billion people who will never take a vaccination again. And that went out to Africa, India, China, America, South America, everywhere. 4 billion, that's half the population of the planet. So that is going to wake people up.
Indeed. Well, I don't know how we're doing for time, if there is a time, but I jolly well hope that Maya, which is a short book, no 600 pages here, and there's 150 of them, I think. So it's a very readable book, and which is not due out until September. I do want to thank you for having, given that wonderful little testimonial you gave. To tell the story very briefly, I'd been introduced, as I say, by name only to yourself by Suzanne Taylor. And I asked Suzanne, do you think I could send this draft copy of my book to Anne, and she said, well, yes, and I'm sure you can. And you replied, it was a wonderful reply. You said, well, I'll read it next Wednesday, which I thought, well, that's you know, you were so detailed. You knew exactly when you were going to, would you say, I'm very, very busy, which of course you are, but I'll read it next Wednesday. And the following Thursday, to your absolute credit, my delight, I received an email back from you saying, well, I've read it. You were utterly true to your word. And I'm most grateful for that. And then, of course, I said, well, now that I've got this wonderful little sort of testimonial from Anne, I would love to use this in trying to find a publisher. And for reasons, you know, for your own reasons, you said, well, I'd rather you didn't use it for that. And I thought, okay, that was disappointing, but I fully accepted it. But then you said something else very, very wonderful. You said, if the Theorius wants it published, it will be published. And so it turned out to be. And I think that one of my favorite quotes come from Shakespeare is, there's a divinity which shapes our ends.
Yes.
Rough hew them how we will.
Will.
Yeah.
I think
And
it's
which
Julius Caesar, I think. Anyway, I remember you now, and I remember writing that. And if you want to use my quote, you can. Because I
yes, no, I did. Because you said once it had been published, you said
yeah.
I could use it. So it's right there on the back of the book.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, Anne. Well, it's been delightful to speak with you. You're in Sussex, I believe.
No, in near Winchester.
Are you?
The most holy city in England. I'm near Winchester.
Yes. I, thanks to COVID, one good thing that came out of it is that I reconnected with several of my old school friends, and we have this WhatsApp group, and several of them sort of live in that sort of area. So when I was at home last year, we all met up in a pub near just outside Winchester. I can't remember the name of the village. And we're going to do the same again this coming year.
Was it Alsford?
No, it wasn't. But that actually, believe it or not, surprise, surprise, is where my publisher, which was John Hunt Publishing,
Hunt. Yes, that's right.
John Hunt Publishing have their offices there of all places.
Yes.
And driving home back to my mother, because my father had just died, unfortunately, but in Bosham in Sussex. We had to drive through Winchester, and I haven't been to Winchester since I was a very small boy, and saw this wonderful, very large statue. I think it must be King Alfred.
Wonderful statue, yes.
It's a wonderful statue. I only sort of caught it from the car, and of course there's the cathedral. So I've sort of made a mental note to myself, because we're going to meet up again when I'm home in a few weeks' time, in another pub in the Winchester area. So I want to spend a bit of time in Winchester, because obviously it is a very, very Anglo-Saxon.
It is Anglo-Saxon, yes. And King Alfred was the greatest king we've ever had. And I often talk to him when I go for a walk. I say, King Alfred, for God's sake, do something, help.
Yes, yeah.
And I always look down on the ground in case I find a wonderful pebble or a special stone that he might have held in his own hand. I do that. Right. I'm in touch with him very much. And it was a great period. The Saxon period was a wonderful period in England before the Normans came, because they set up all these local courts everywhere where the justice was done, so to speak, by the local people. They didn't have a centralized system. And he traveled when he was 5 years old to Rome with his father. Can you believe it? And because of what he saw there about the extraordinary richness of the culture, he wanted to bring that back to England in his court. So he had scholars come from Italy and teach the English scribes or whatever how to speak Latin, and got the whole thing going of the cultural foundation of England. He was just an amazing man, wonderful man. And also his grandson,
Ethelred?
No, not Ethelred. No, Athelstan.
Okay, yeah. They all had wonderful names as well.
Yeah, Athelstan is a marvelous name. And my grandson went to the school where Athelstan's chapel is.
Good heavens. Yeah, wonderful.
Anyway, lovely to talk to you, Paul. It's really true.
Indeed.
And
yes, indeed.
See Jack again. So we'll keep in touch and try and get that Messages book And I will get the other book that you mentioned, or you'll send it to me. Yes, that would
I
be.
will send you the 12 blessings. I just need a mailing address.
Okay, well, Jack, I will communicate
Jack,
that.
I'll put you two in
Indeed.
touch, after
Yeah.
the show.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Jack.
No, thank you both of you. It's been wonderful listening to you sharing all your thoughts, and it's been a real privilege. I think people will get so much from this conversation.
Good. I always forget it's going out to other people, but
Yeah.
we've said a lot, which is nice, I think.
Yes, thank you.
Anyway, God bless you both. And
God bless you too.
yeah,
Lovely to meet you.
keep in touch with the
Yes.
great divine.
There are some good things about this modern era, and such as this kind of
such as this.
technology.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And when you're trying to sort of find your way in a car, and the car will direct you to the, where you want to go, turn left, turn right, wonderful technology. There's so many good things to celebrate.
No, there are. That's right.
Would you both tell your websites so that people listening can go and check you both out?
Yeah, well, my website, I've got two websites, an old one, which is Anne-Baring.com, www.anne-baring.com, and the newest one is AnneBaring.com, www.annebaring.com. Both of them are interesting. One of them has the recording of the Dream of the Cosmos, that is the old one, and the new one has a huge number of lectures and talks that I've given, including that one to Erwin Laszlo. So it might interest, and also I have other things on the website which I think might interest people. Okay.
And my website is sedimentofmysoul.com. And the other one I would refer to would be the Aetherius Society, which is aetherius.org, AETHERIUS.org.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. And Deborah.
Deborah, yeah.